Welcome everyone to today's seminar at the Center for Languages, Culture and Communication. It's a huge pleasure and privilege for me to introduce today's speaker, Debra Gray. I met Debs quite recently at the Learning and Teaching meeting up in Sheffield, the Advanced HE meeting, and she was one of the keynote speakers. And it was one of those talks that I remember with great pleasure, great fondness, and I found incredibly provocative and very inspiring. So I pestered Debra to come and talk to us because I thought it would be really informative for everything that we're thinking and considering doing. So I don't want to embarrass her, but she's quite an extraordinary woman. And she is a CBE, MBE, Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. She's Principal and Chief Executive of Hull College, and she's nationally recognized as a leader in further education. And for those of you following the field, you will know that she's done an amazing job at Hull, where she is now. She's been awarded an MBE in 2020 and the CBE in 2026, New Year's Honours for Services to Education. She's widely known for leading complex institutional recovery and for championing high-quality inclusive education in areas facing long-standing disadvantage. And since taking up her role at the Hull College in 2022, she has overseen a rapid turnaround, including a good Ofsted judgment with outstanding features and the college's successful exit from prolonged government intervention. Not a small feat. She's a doctoral researcher and she's a frequent keynote speaker, and her work focuses on the future of education in the context of digital transformation, AI, and skills for an evolving economy. I think it's fair to say you're in for a treat, and I would like to welcome Debs again and thank her.
Hiya. You all right? It's really, really lovely to see you. It's not often someone like me gets invited to somewhere like Imperial, so I plan to milk this at every dinner party I don't get invited to, because nobody ever invites me to dinner parties. So what am I going to look at with you today? Well, first things first, let me just see if I need to be within radius.
Just because we're Imperial Fellows
doesn't mean the technology works.
Try again.
Yep. Come on in, make yourself comfy. There we go. So this is me. Please do feel free to tag me on LinkedIn, say hello, take a picture with me waving at you. It proves to my chair of governors that I am actually out working for a living and I haven't just come to London for a jolly. So what are we going to discuss then? Randomly, we're going to talk about elephants. We're going to talk about waltzing. How many of you can do a waltz? Show me your hands. Waltzed. Wonderful. Not going to ask you to practice it. We're going to talk about Borg cubes. Any Star Trek fans in the room? See my scarf. We're going to talk a little bit about the Olduvai Valley, the steam engine, and butterflies. So, might be a bit of AI on the way, but we'll see how that lands. So, first things first, let's address the elephant in the room, right? Because I am FE through and through. It's my trade. It's what I do for a living. So why am I here? Well, FE is not all FE colleges do. We also have a very long and esteemed tradition of HE in FE. In fact, some FE colleges in the country have been running HE longer than universities have been running HE. So around 100,000 people every single year study HE in an FE college. Typically, they tend to skew a little bit older. They have caring responsibilities. They're not a mobile population. And 149 colleges are on the OFS register. So we make up probably just less than half of the whole of the OFS register. 74% of our students are 21 plus, but we research, we publish, we have fellows, we have doctoral scholars. We kind of do what you do in a very contained and small way. And we are deploying AI at scale and have been doing so for 3 years. We tend to be a tad more agile, arguably. we can move a little bit faster, and we don't tend to argue much amongst ourselves about it. We'll go, do you know what, let's have a go with that. And we have a go with that. There's not kind of any faculty discussion about it. We tend to be much of a muchness. So what I will say is AI is not our first rodeo, not in higher education and certainly not in further education. So how many of you right now on your person have a pen? That's an interesting thing, because this is a pen. Or are you enfeebled? Genuine question. Does having a pen in your pocket enfeeble you? Is your memory gone? To be fair, your memory might be gone anyway. Mine certainly is, but not necessarily because of the pen. So for this invention will produce forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it, because they will not practice their memory. Sound familiar? Some of the fears about AI, some of the fears about cognitive decline. The pen, arguably one of the greatest inventions we've ever made, transformed the transmission of knowledge. And you know what? My memory certainly might not have been as good as Socrates, but Socrates can't do what I do every day either. Printing press. An abundance of books makes men less studious. Well, I kind of don't know about that. Have you read a book recently? I mean, online, you know, or physical paper-based? Hands up for me. Are you less studious because you read a book? Or arguably more studious because you read a book? It relieves the mind of too much work. Well, I don't know. It depends what book you're reading. I find some books very hard work. So where were my waltzers? Put your hands back up. Disgraceful behaviour. Absolutely disgraceful. Colleagues, I hope you're looking at them. So long as this obscene display was confined to prostitutes and adulteresses, we did not think it deserving of notice. But now that it is attempted to be forced onto the respectable classes, well, we feel it's a duty to warn every parent against exposing their daughter to so fatal a contagion. Waltzers, honestly. So, it kind of doesn't look as offensive as it might be described here, but this is 1816 in the Times. So we've done this before. We've lived these moral panics about new things, whether that's the social movement or whether it's about technology before. Maybe not as often in our lifetime, although I'll bet many people in this room remember the invention of the internet. I certainly do. Or remember when social media kind of first took its baby steps. So we've seen some of this. Cinema. Who's been to the pictures recently? Well, you've been corrupted and you just didn't know. This new form of entertainment has gone far to blast maidenhoods. Have you lost your maidenhoods? Literally don't know what to say about that. Depraved adults with candies and pennies beguile children with the inevitable result. God alone knows how many are leading dissolute lives begun at the moving pictures. Well, I went to see Wicked, and I don't feel that dissolute, if I'm honest. Thought it was quite a good film. Rock and roll. How many people are old enough to remember? I'm not quite. I'm going to be entirely honest, I'm not quite. So the effect of rock and roll on young people is to turn them into devil worshippers, stimulate self-expression through sex, to provoke lawlessness and destroy the sanctity of marriage. Now, do you know what? I've listened to the Stones a fair bit, and I'm still married, and I haven't yet committed like a capital crime. So I'm not convinced. And this is a good one. I like this one because I am terrible at maths, and that is not a brag. Honestly, I am ashamed of being terrible at maths. But this saved my academic career, this invention. It saved my schooling. It still sits on my desk now and is in my phone, in my pocket. Maths teachers protesting against calculator use because it will dumb down education. And now we have calculator papers. And it's perfectly normal. Do you know what? I can't do that in my head. Let me just get my phone out. Video games. Any gamers? Me too. What do you play? Well, I'm a Warcraft player in particular. Any other Warcraft players? Nice. Horde or Alliance? I'm Alliance. No. I don't even know what to say about that. Okay. But the disturbing material in Grand Theft Auto and other games like it is stealing the innocence of our children. And it's making the difficult job of being a parent even harder. I believe that the ability of our children to access pornographic and outrageously violent material on video games generated for adults is spiraling out of control. So that's Hillary Rodham Clinton, 2005. I got my first Pong game. Anybody old enough to remember Pong in the 1970s? Thank you, making me not feel as old as I'm currently feeling. I played Pong in about 1979 or so. My uncle had a console. I then went on to the Ataris, the VIC-20s, and I've currently got pretty much every console in my house, and I love to game with my children. I don't think yet it's stolen my innocence, and I'm not entirely convinced my children have been ruined by it. Moral panics, it's an interesting one. But this is what I'm going to say to you. Every time a new technology emerges, every single time, there's panic. And then there's adaptation, and then there's progress. The printing press, the radio, the internet, and now artificial intelligence. And the interesting thing for me is it's never about the technology. Regardless of whether we're talking about the pen and Socrates, or we're talking about the printing press, it's never about the technology. It's about us. It's about how we react. It's about how threatened we feel. It's about how we feel about change. It's about how sometimes change makes us bristle. And it makes us uncomfortable because that's not how we did things. When in 20 years' time, it will be absolutely the way the next generation does things. And they will bristle at the next thing. So for centuries, higher education genuinely held the keys to knowledge dissemination. And because of that, fears were manageable. When you hold the keys to knowledge and people have to come through your gates and your doors to have that knowledge disseminated to them, that's a relatively safe position to be in. We controlled the curriculum, we controlled the pace, and in many ways, because of that, we controlled the academics of the future. We controlled how knowledge was even created. Students came to us, though, because knowledge was scarce. Because books, as you've seen, weren't available. And as books became more available, they were housed in big things called libraries, which people now tend not to use quite so much. So they still had to come to the places that had libraries, which is places like us, colleges and universities. And so we were the vault. We held that knowledge, we curated it. It was precious to us. As practitioners, as academics, our discipline mattered. But now it is very, very different. Those vault keys aren't yours, they're not mine. They're held now in a variety of different technological places, and actually they are sitting right in your pocket. And if they're sitting in your pocket, they're sitting in your student's pocket as well. And it's not just running GPT-5 on a phone or Claude or whatever your poison of choice is. It's about, I can learn plumbing now from a YouTube video. Why would I go and learn it in a classroom? When knowledge is free, what role do we hold? And the interesting thing for me is it's not going to stop. You saw the Borg cube. For those of you who aren't Star Trek fans, the Borg are unstoppable. Resistance is futile. They're going to come get you and they will assimilate you. So the question isn't how do we stop them? It's futile. The horse has bolted. And actually, it's having a great time running around the field. You're not getting it back. Where do we go from here? And this is a really interesting picture. This. Any anthropologists in the room? This is an older one tool. Dates from about 2.6 million years ago. First flaked blade in the Olduvai Valley in Tanzania. And it's a tool. It's just a tool. It cuts things. And we in this room, every single one of us, are the custodians of over 2.6 million years of educational transmission. We can trace our lineage back to these tools because this required someone to teach the next generation how to make it. So that's how important you are. You are the custodians, essentially, of our entire culture, the knowledge we've held and the knowledge we are building. And the best teachers were never just about content. It's never just been, I'm going to drop knowledge on you, go away. We create meaning with those learners. We guide them. We have always guided them. Sometimes we've picked them up when they've been on the floor. Sometimes they've picked us up when we felt like we've been on the floor. The very best educators are not just about the knowledge. They're about the care and the passion and the mentoring and the support and the transformational work it takes to bring a young person or an adult who's returning to education to meet their full potential. So we still matter in this world because where there is a world of infinite questions, and that's the world we live in, somebody has to teach how you ask the questions. How do you interrogate all of that knowledge? How do you test the knowledge that is coming out? How do you know it's true? How do you know it has value? How do you know to reflect? Because in a world of instant dopamine fixes, how do you pause? Well, we know those skills, so we can still teach those skills. And the interesting thing is, if any of you are worried about AI taking your jobs, and honestly, we hear this all the time, your job was more than just the knowledge. It always was, and it always will be. But I think probably if you've not heard the fact that someone using AI might take your job, that's a different thing. AI, probably not in our lifetime. Someone else using AI to be more efficient, to be more targeted, to have better productivity, because a tool is just a tool is a tool. So what's our role then? Well, we translate complexity into clarity. Really, really hard sometimes for AI to do that. Now, I have used AI shamelessly in my doctorate to try and understand and embed in my brain epistemology and ontology. Because honestly, the wrestling I have done with that would probably make dyed-in-the-wool academics howl with laughter, right? But for me, that was a wrestle. It's like, what even is this? What even is this? And I interrogated the AI to the nth degree, because honestly, my poor lecturer, my supervisor, had probably had enough of me by that point, because there's only so many times you can go back right before she starts thinking of, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. And I just said, explain it like I'm 5. Give me an analogy using ice cream. And then it started to stick, because I could direct my own learning in a way that suited me. But we create insight, not just modules. So a module is a module. It's no big deal. It's just a bundle of content wrapped up with a pretty ribbon. How do you make sense of that? What does it actually mean? What does it mean to say those things, to know those things? Where did the knowledge come from? How do we challenge that knowledge? What's the next evolutionary step in that knowledge? We show patterns and connections and possibilities. You live possibilities every day in a way that I don't. So what my college does, and just for some context, I run a college that serves the 4th most deprived local authority in England. So in the area that I serve, life expectancy in some of our wards is 12 years below the national average. 70% of all of my students come to me without English, without maths, or without both. And it suffers from systemic economic disadvantage. And we have to show all of our learners, whether they are privileged, whether they are not, what are the options for their life. Not career, not just skills, but their life. Because whatever skills and information we teach now will be dead in 5 years anyway, replaced by the next set because information moves that quickly. How do we help them adapt to a world that is constantly changing? And we help learners trust themselves, especially when the machine is wrong. And it is wrong a lot of the time. AI is not a panacea. It has to be very, very carefully checked. It has to be very carefully interrogated. And sometimes, even when that happens, it is still plain wrong. It gets it wrong. Almost makes it human. We model uncertainty and curiosity. And for people like you in this room, humility. You're academics. Knowledge is your trade. You know you don't know everything. Otherwise, you wouldn't do the job you do. Research is your lifeblood. Wanting to know the next thing, wanting to know the next question. You make knowledge, not just disseminate knowledge. So what does that mean in practice then? Because all that's really, really good rhetoric, right? But what does it actually mean? Well, you don't climb Everest just because your guide knows the way, do you? I'd rather sit at the bottom with a cup of tea, quite frankly. You climb it because your guide helps you find your way. What's your way to climb your mountain? Not the predetermined path. What's your way? My way isn't your way. Won't even be common in this room. So how do we personalize? And how does AI enable us to personalize at scale? Because arguably, for a very, very long time, we've sheep-dipped learners. Same modules, same assessment, same way of teaching, year after year. Updates for knowledge, but the principles haven't changed. How do we personalize at scale when learners are demanding personalization? When they're saying, this doesn't work for me. How can you make this work for me? Maybe I'm neurodiverse. Maybe I don't come from privilege. Maybe I've got a disability. Maybe I just learn in a different way. But I can excel if I'm given the right path. This enables you, as educators, to find the right path at scale without hurting your workload. It's a different way of operating. And really, really good educators, they know the risks. They know the shortcuts, and they know the moments to rest and to push. So when you're working with students, you get a read on your students very quickly, I am certain, if you are good teachers. You know when they can push. You also know when they're just taking the long way around. And you know, if you just take this approach in a lab or in a ward, or in my case, in a bathroom for plumbers, or in a car for engineers. And the thing is, we don't take the journey for them. They have to walk it alone. What we have to do is give them the tools and the skills that will be needed, not for now, although that's valuable, but for the next 10 years, for the next 15 years. Because the skills of now matter momentarily. The skills we build for them have to last a lifetime. And essentially, that's what educators have become now, or are in the process of becoming. We're stewards of growth. We co-navigate with our learners that meaning. What does it mean now to be educated? It's not me standing here giving it this, talking to you like I know everything. What do you think? What do you know? How can we do this better? How can we build collective intelligence to solve our collective problems? And how does AI supercharge that. So the interesting thing for me is AI changes way beyond what students learn. It changes how, when, and with whom they can learn. And this is challenging. It really is. If you have lived this life, if this is what you do, this will be hard. But ultimately, learning should be on demand, not on a schedule. I can download telly when I want. Why am I waiting for next Tuesday's lecture? Don't understand it. I'm paying for it. I want it how I want it, quite frankly. I want to explore. I don't just want to sit in a class and be talked to. I don't want somebody to pull up PowerPoints exactly as I'm doing now, funnily enough. I don't want that. I want to talk about this. I want to explore what this means. I want to challenge you and your knowledge. I want to challenge my own knowledge, because only through that challenging can I make something that's robust. I want to create. I don't just want to consume. I want to have a hand in this. I want it to be mine as well as yours. And I want to learn with tools, not just teachers. And there are masses of tools out there now. AI tutoring is huge. Agent deployment is becoming increasingly bigger. We're practicing at the moment with Halo, which is a safeguarding agent, where it contains all of our, it's kind of firewalled, all of our safeguarding policies. It can interrogate. If I type in, students have just been to see me with this problem, I'm not sure what to do, it'll tell me who my safeguarding lead is, it'll give me their number, it'll tell you, it will just absolutely help cut through some of the admin burden for a lot of these things. And really, you know, reading the book, attending the lecture and doing the assignment, it isn't a valid way to learn anymore. It's doing the job of work that's always been done, right? But the world's moved on beyond that. And you can't afford to not move as the world moves. And especially in an organization like yours, because you are the vanguard of knowledge and excellence. That's what the top flight universities have always been. You're where everyone else looks to see the leading edge. And the new model says, prompt the AI, remix the idea, iterate the idea. Don't like that answer. What about this? What about this? What if the patient has this? How do we iterate and iterate and iterate until we've got something that's incredibly valuable to us? And then we test it and we share it and we challenge it and we refine it. And we don't always do that on our own. It's messy, but it's faster. And it's more real. And honestly, your students are already doing this, whether they're telling you or not. So what still needs to be taught then? Critical thinking. You cannot just buy what you're seeing on Facebook. Anybody got elderly relatives in the room? Yeah. You ever get those calls, I saw this thing on Facebook? Yeah, you know, critical thinking is a massive skill. We still have to teach it. And actually, there's an awful lot of adults still need that skill, not just an undergrad skill. We need to teach discernment. Which bits of information are valid? Which bit of information is more important than another piece of information? We do need to teach ethics in this world, because ethical practice is truly what makes us human. It's what defines us, actually. And you can put ethics boxes around your AI, but ultimately it's a machine. It doesn't feel like we feel. It doesn't see like we see. It can't draw on our lived experience. So it might see one of my students, for example, who might be neurodiverse, who's not attending, who's maybe not performing. And it might make a judgment on what should happen next. But I know that youngster doesn't have a mattress to sleep on at home. And I know that youngster's hungry. And I'll do something about that. Would an AI? Adaptability and empathy. We've got to be changing regularly. And change is hard work. And it challenges us. And it's just tiring, because it feels like you're on a constant treadmill of, why can't we ever settle? Why can't we ever just have a couple of years where nothing changes and I can just get to grips with all this stuff that's swirling around me? Well, you know, it's kind of life though, isn't it? You know, life doesn't pause. So certainly education doesn't pause. We need to give them the ability to decide when not to trust a tool or when to choose the right tool for the right job. Any engineers in the room? Fab. You'll know all about choosing the right tool for the right job. So when I get a Phillips screwdriver out and my husband laughs at me and he says, that ain't gonna work. Right tool for the right job, right AI for the right job, right technology for the right job. But essentially, it's a tool. If we weren't adaptive tool-making apes, we wouldn't be sitting in this room now. It's not a bad thing. And we need to have the courage to ask the next question when the first answer's too easy. And easy answers often are what AI's first answer is all about, which is why it gets such a bad rap. Because it's an easy answer, but it's basic and it's wrong. So iterate it, prompt remix it, get the right output. And there's some really, really good examples out there. So in 2024, an Australian university built an AI-powered chatbot built on retrieval augmented generation. So it's got its own little knowledge base that its academics put in, and it can only draw on that knowledge base. And it was essentially a 24/7 academic and support function, never turned off, ready whenever the students needed it. And, you know, my son, my middle child, is a third year undergrad in York. And he doesn't seem to keep normal hours. So like 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting a text like, Mom, do you think this reference is right? And I'm like in bed. I'm like, kid, you've got to get a grip on this, right? But they're not working our hours. They're just not. So where's their support when they need it? Well, how about this to back you as an academic? Not to replace you, but to back you so your students have the very best possible support at all times, even when you are not available, because you have curated the knowledge they can draw upon. Students who used it scored 9.5% higher in final exams, and the net promoter score feedback was 92, and 72% of those students said they'd be very disappointed if it was taken away. So the spike in usage as well that was patterned was just before the exams, because students aren't revising little and often. Normally they're ignoring it because they're at work or they're out with their friends, they're doing whatever else they do. And then suddenly 3 days before the exam, it's like, oh my God, I've got an exam. And then you're not available, or it's the middle of the night in, you know, my son's case. But stress peaks when traditional supports shuts down. And this helps students. At MIT, this was data I picked up about 2 weeks ago. Interesting movements from academic year 24-25 to academic year 25-26. And essentially, daily AI usage amongst their master's cohort quadrupled. Non-users of AI are gone, down to 1% essentially. And I don't use it dropped from 15.5 to 5.6%. And actually, the biggest growth in tasks was idea generation. So they're not necessarily using it to cheat, although I think, you know, we get over-obsessed by this whole plagiarism business. If you don't want them to plagiarize, don't set a 3,000-word assignment. Set something else. It's within your gift. And learning interests served. They are interested in AI. They are interested in what it can do. And when they go into work, it will be ubiquitous in their industry. So disruption does not knock. It will blow your door down. AI isn't a subject. I mean, forgive me, any computer science and scientists in the room. It clearly is a subject, right? But it's a force multiplier in everything we do. And we need to be ready to teach students how to work with it in every field. Not in bits, but across every field. You can work with it in, I mean, my fields are very different from yours, but you know, we've got junior chefs using it to iterate recipes or find the best recipes in the world. We've got care specialists using it to decide how to deal with dementia patients. We've got engineers using it for digital twinning and all kinds of interesting things. And HE has always assumed its structures are safe because we held the keys to the knowledge. We were the gatekeepers. We were protected by tradition. We've been protected by history. But when a sector is slow moving and it's expensive and arguably it's fragmented, standing still doesn't feel like a great idea. Ask the taxi industry about Uber and how that worked out. Ask Blockbuster. Anybody remember Blockbuster with fondness? I do. Ask Blockbuster about Netflix. How many of you got Netflix? Anybody kept their Blockbuster card? So big tech also offers industry accredited qualifications. Amazon does, you know, all of the big companies do. Private platforms now offer full degrees at lower cost with greater flexibility. And FE colleges are embedding AI into curriculum assessment, while some universities are still deciding whether AI is cheating. I don't want you to be left behind because people like you make the difference to people like me. You're where we send our students. You're where we go to become the people who we want to be. And if we don't deliver flexible, personalised, skills-rich education, the fact of the matter is someone else will, and they will not ask our permission. So what about bias then? Because, you know, the concerns are real. They are absolutely real. And we hear a lot about bias. But how many in this room of you are social scientists or humanities background? Give me a wave. Are we biased? Yeah. And what is AI trained on? It's trained on our outputs. It doesn't wake up one morning and decide to be a bigot. It is trained on the very outputs we've put into the world. It is biased because we are biased. And if we want AI to be less biased, what's the answer? We must be less biased. It reflects our data, our choices, and our patterns. It can, but you can also say that to me to my face, right? And I would get a grip on it. Might not change my outputs in other ways, but essentially it reflects the biases that we've put into its training models and its training data. So AI didn't make the recruitment gap. It didn't make women's pay lower. It didn't decide not to give women the vote. It didn't build a curriculum that's 80% white, male, and global north. It just absorbed what we fed it. So bias isn't an AI problem, it's a human problem. And to be fair, it has always been a human problem. So interrogate the bias, but consider where your bias comes in also. If we want AI to be more just, we need to be more just. And it also gets things wrong. Oh my word, it gets things wrong. I've seen some utter howlers. If you ever put your own name and say, what does the internet know about me? Oh, it's hilarious. You know, you need a strong stomach for it, but I recommend it. But ultimately, it's a baby. And I get, you know, we might not want to anthropomorphize this, but it's about 4 years old. It's kind of running around in its digital nappies. It is inaccurate sometimes, but it never stops learning. And it learns fast. It learns very, very fast indeed. And how it will iterate over the next 5 years is likely to be unrecognizable. And there is a question really about cognitive decline. It's making us all not remember things. Students will rely on it. Kind of sounds like Socrates and the pen. The question isn't really, is it dulling our minds? Is, do we need to spend our mind and our time on the thing we were spending it on when there's so many more interesting things to do and this can be done all on its own? So I don't wash my own clothes. I've got a washing machine, right? I leave my washing machine all on its own to wash my clothes, and I go do something much more interesting.
So I do take the point about the moral panic related to technology. But unlike the written press, unlike the pen, unlike the radio, we're now dealing with the technology generated television. So the risk to sort of thinking seems
interesting, genuinely an interesting point. The point I think what I would make about that is we're often very bad at seeing the implications of something while we're in it. So we look back at Socrates and we're like, mate, you know, that was a bit wrong. What will people think about what we're thinking now in 30, 40 years' time? And I did a bit of research where a principal colleague of mine gave me a really interesting quote. And the quote was, when survival's automated, why do you need to learn those skills? And I found that a real provocation. But ultimately, as colleges, I don't teach thatching. I don't teach saddlery. Some colleges still do, legacy skills still matter. But there are things I just don't teach anymore because they're not needed. And the question is, do we know and do we have a clear enough grasp on what things might not be needed anymore? And I'm not sure at this point we do, because we're in it. And when you're in it, it's hard to see it clearly. And just consider for a second, I think every generation mistakes change in cognitive style for a decline in intelligence. But maybe what we're calling cognitive erosion might just be a reconfiguring of what intelligence is and what it does and how it's applied. And a provocation, really. You know, if AI exposure were shown to reduce certain internal cognitive skills, but perhaps drastically increase collective problem solving, would we call that a decline or would we call it an advancement? Hard to know at this stage, and you'll have your own opinion on that. And I don't claim to have an opinion one way or the other. But the arc of history is really interesting. So humans have never been a species where we have preserved our cognitive skills unchanged. We just never have. We wouldn't be where we are if we had. We are defined by externalizing our cognition onto tools and then reorganizing our lives around those tools. You've got a telly, you've got a washing machine, you've got books, you've got a pen, you've got a phone, you've got cameras that you're taking pictures with. We project our intelligence onto things that make our lives better. And if they make our lives better, they survive. And if they don't make our lives better, they don't survive. Anybody remember the Sinclair C5? Come on, people have got to be nodding at this. Because that didn't survive because it made nobody's life any better. So when all we focus on is the assessment integrity, are we missing the bigger picture here? Kind of makes me wish I was in your shoes so I could do the research to answer that question. And there is an argument now that students are also changing. They're changing what they want, they're changing what they need. Spotify's taken over, Uber's taken over. Convenience, cost, and personalization win. That's the reality of what we've seen over the last 20 years. The experience didn't disappear. It just changed shape. People aren't going out now to a restaurant. They're getting Uber Eats. The experience of eating the food's still there, but it comes to my door when I want it, quite frankly. Something, I think, for all of us to consider. And ultimately, don't panic. What we're in at the minute is a period of turbulence. Arguably an industrial revolution. Very arguably. But essentially, more jobs will be created than they're lost. But my word, there'll be some turbulence between the two poles. And that, again, is entirely normal. So we do more than survive when technology happens. So, steam engine, introduced 1775. And the Industrial Revolution kind of triggered, arguably again, by that moment. And human social development at that point bounced. It's not a coincidence. So, I want to leave you with just a few thoughts, really. I don't know if you know how important you are as educators. So I grew up on a council estate in Sheffield. My dad was an alcoholic, and I am essentially the product of a single parent family on benefits. If people like you all of you in this room hadn't taken an interest in a scrappy kid with absolutely zero social capital and very little academic ability at the time, and a very angry girl, I would not now be able to helm one of the best colleges in the country and come here to speak to you. You matter more than you could possibly know, because you change the lives of people just like me. It's not about the technology, it's about the humanity that goes along with it. So you've lifted students from places that no algorithm could, because you lifted me. So all I'm going to say to you is, please don't be scared. You know how to adapt. You know how to care. You know how to lift people higher. So this is your opportunity to transform. Jump in. The water is lovely. Thank you. Look at that, broadly to time as well.
Perfect. We have the comments online that they couldn't hear the questions from the audience. So what I'm going to ask is that we're a bit disciplined, and whoever wants to ask a question waits for the microphone so that colleagues can hear, and also so that it's in the recording.
Absolutely.
And then we pass it on. All right. So I wasn't on my phone, Debs. I was actually trying to monitor.
I don't judge. People work on their phones. It's absolutely fine.
Questions for our wonderful speaker. Edie.
Thank you so much. More than a question, I think it's a reiteration of something that you said, which is the problem is us. The AI or the large language models is not going to steal our language. It's not going to steal our knowledge. We will do it to ourselves when we decide to stop learning. And I welcome this sudden revolution in a way, because it has forced us to remember that we should be the custodians of learning, not the custodians of knowledge.
Absolutely. That is such a great point, because, you know, we hold a lot of information. It's kind of what we do, right? It's never been about the information. It's about how the person and the transmission process works. It's about real teaching and learning. I think you're right. And I find it exciting. I don't find it scary at all. I love new technology. I like to play. I'm a gamer, by trade, but I like to play, and I think more people should play and actually have a go and see what's the worst that can happen, as long as you're not sharing data.
My question is about the kind of ethical aspects of AI use. So I'm thinking about the environmental impact, the sort of, I think it does steal knowledge. My colleague Afric here has written books. It's trained itself on them, not given her any money. Do you know of any AIs that kind of don't do that?
Ethical
that reduce
technology.
And the other sort of ethical aspect is, these companies like Spotify, like Amazon, they work on a model of market domination.
Yes, they do.
So once we all go, yeah, okay, we're all going to do it, and we buy into that, then we're stuck with it. We can't go back to blockbusters if we want to.
Yep, that's absolutely
so
true.
My question is, do you know of an AI model that is more ethical?
Well, it depends which aspect of ethics you're talking about. So kind of let me deal with the knowledge thievery first, because the AI didn't do that for itself. That information model was fed to it, and
that's the internet. So
the AI has to kind of be given the links, has to be given the information. It's not necessarily acting without instruction, is all I'm saying. So, and the instruction has to come from somebody
who produced the knowledge.
No, but the instruction of the owner. So I'm kind of separating the two. So the AI, the people who develop AI and have used training data may well have acted unethically. That may well be the case, but that's not AI itself. Because AI is a machine, it's like a computer. That computer can't act unethically. I can act unethically when I'm on it. It's a different approach.
Yeah.
In terms of sustainability, that's a really interesting question. It's one my students ask me quite often. And the truth is, welcome to capitalism. You know, this is the truth in all industries. This is the truth in industries that pump out chemicals, that create global warming, that pollute the oceans. You know, all of the above. So, you know, there is a question about, do you fight the tide or do you use the tide to your advantage? And I can't answer that for you. I only know what I'm doing, which is trying to use the tide to advantage my learners.
The example that you gave of the Macquarie University, Australia one, presumably that was a bounded set of knowledge.
Yes. And most of the academic trials have been, and that's very sensible and ethical. You don't want to let it go wild. So if you bound it, if it's all your content, if it's the things you've curated, it's the things you've put walls around, then there's very little opportunity for rogue knowledge to get in and perhaps give your students the wrong impression. So when we create agents, we bind it. It can only access these particular sets of information, which means it's the only place it can draw information from. And that's a much safer way to operate, certainly for now. But this is the Wild West, essentially. We're all finding our way in grey spaces. And I would always rather work in collaboration and cooperation with people to navigate those grey spaces than simply avoid them.
Thank you. I during the presentation, I was a bit confused because in my mind, I couldn't really, I didn't fully agree with what you were saying that this is the keys to knowledge being lost, because I think that's already happened. That was just the internet. It's like when I went to university, I was already going on Wikipedia, going on YouTube, learning things on my own. Yeah. That didn't really involve AI. So I think this is slightly different because this is actually affecting the teaching. This is not about knowledge, this is about teaching. And slightly going back to the ethics question, I think the real problem with this is the misunderstanding from the general public about what these like AIs like ChatGPT, Gemini, all those things really are doing. People are being sold the idea that this is actually going online and searching things and learning things and then just trying to teach you those things. Well, in reality, it's just kind of statistically saying like, this is what all the other text looks like. This is something that's similar.
It's like autocomplete on
exactly,
steroids.
Yeah. So then the problem is, I think what really needs to be done with the teaching. So also, I don't know if this is going to be a question. I'm just rambling.
Keep going. Keep going.
The problem is that people need to be taught like, this is not actually trying to teach you. This is just generally taking what things look like and producing something similar. And in a sense, I think that leads to stagnation, because if you're always taking the same corpus of like the training material and then outputting new things out of the same thing, you're then always teaching the same things. So going back to your point about being stagnant and being slow changing, then this is also going to be very stagnant and slow changing. So I think it's a bigger problem than it's not just whether it's cheating or not. It's a big problem of the ethic of the people selling these models to people as something that they're not.
I wouldn't disagree with you, but again, welcome to capitalism, where advertising and selling people things that don't quite do the job of work, or perhaps even arguably aren't needed. It's kind of how we live our lives. So I don't blame people who develop AI for doing what every other company in the history of companies have done. I think what I would say is we've deployed AI at scale for our teachers. It helps them prepare their lessons. It helps them personalize lessons. We use a tool called Teachermatic to do that. It's actually very good. And there are no, I'm not plugging that company, by the way. There's lots of other things out there that do the same job. So it's helped with teacher workload. And that's a real benefit. We've deployed AI-based translation at scale for our students who don't speak English. And that's been incredibly powerful, because using that technology, they can now interface with doctors, surgeries and dentists and local authorities in a way they couldn't before. And it helps them settle into life in modern Britain. So I think we have a tendency to go straight to the problems rather than to think, okay, what about the opportunities? And then how do we work through?
Well, because I think the problem with that is that, the opportunities, all those systems that you're describing, those are fantastic. I have no problem with that. Like, I recently was teaching a lecture, and it's like there's this fantastic machine learning model that helps scientists with the flow cytometry. It's fantastic. It's useful. It helps everyone. And that's fine. And those things exist in a sort of vacuum because they're done specifically for the job they're meant to do, and they're only disseminated among the people that really need them.
That's right.
So those are never really going to be a problem. They're going to work the way they're intended to work, and that's why we focus on the problems, because they're massive at the moment as well. Everyone going to ChatGPT saying like, "Oh, write me this essay that I need to write," and
So
yeah, it's definitely exactly
essay.
like you said, and I do agree with that. Like, it's kind of pointless to do something like that. You need to have better ways to evaluate your students.
Knowledge,
exactly, you need to, but then that's more like a pedagogy problem, not really an AI problem.
Exactly, and I think this is the thing. We tend to hang problems on AI that maybe don't belong on a technology. I've kind of got this vision in the Olduvai Valley 2.6 million years ago of Ugg, the caveman, forgive me, anthropologists in the room, saying these tools, these cutting tools, they'll never catch on. We used to do it differently in my day. It makes me smile.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I've been waiting
Absolutely.
very patiently, so I'll be very quick.
Can I just first say I am an imposter because I'm not a lecturer, I'm a digital strategist.
You're not
so
an
I'm sorry.
imposter at all. It's lovely to see you.
I found this really interesting, but what I would say is that I would advise, being arrogant, that your roles are very much about very quickly moving with all these stages. So actually at the moment, so the curriculum's the same, what we're teaching is the same. Therefore, people using ChatGPT, that's lost itself. It's really lost itself at the moment. For a start, you've got to all move on to Claude. But you go to ChatGPT and your students are asking basic questions. They want their homework done or whatever it is you give them. So the first step is, how do you help them to prompt AI better, to set it up properly? And ChatGPT is doing that very badly at the moment. So helping them with that. The next thing is, I do actually think, like I already have mine, they will have a personal agent that will know how they work, and it will actually do some of those things that you said you're doing. It will do that for you. So then you move with that and say, well, how can you support with that?
That's right.
And then there is a next step, which is the curriculum will probably change. The exams will change. Will they take exams? What will they do? So in my view, everything you're saying is completely right for here and now.
That's right.
But the truth is, what's it going to be in 3 months? What's it going to be in 6 months? And it's just constantly being very aware and, to your point, trusting it and knowing that it's scary. I'm sounding nervous now. I'm scared in the room with all of you academic people. So, you know, it's about that.
I think you're absolutely right.
You know,
you are absolutely right. We've got no idea. Do you know, if I could predict, quite frankly, I would not be helming up a college, would I? I'd be working at some big tech company. We don't know, but we have to know the path is grey, and we have to work together to lay those stones. And my view is, as academics, as educators, as support staff in universities, we've always been stronger when we've stood together. We've always been stronger when we've used collective knowledge and collective ideas. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter whether people agree with what I've said or whether you don't. What matters is, how are you going to plan for that grey space? Because only you know your discipline and your learners and your willingness to engage with tech, whether it comes at you or not. It's a very personal journey.
Well, okay, Kirsten, and we need to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but Kirsten, and then we'll.
I've been thinking about this quite a lot because I've had some academic dishonesty sort of cases that have come up. And one of the things that it led me to think about quite strongly was, have we been really explicit with our students about what the culture of research in our disciplines is? Because what we found in these couple of cases, that we do a lot of active learning through our research methods and we do supervision and that sort of thing, but we still had a couple of students who were trying to circumvent a lot of what we took as a given as research culture, that they were completely stepping around. So something like, we sort of take as a given that as you develop your research, that you sort of are able to situate yourself in the field that you're in or interested in, so that you're sort of thinking about your ideas relative to others, and then doing your research to see how it adds, you know, kind of the basics, right?
Yep.
But what the student did was did their research, wrote it up, thought about their own conclusions, and then went and looked for evidence to sort of what I would call cherry picking. Yeah. And then took some more shortcuts and didn't really check the references carefully that they were supposed to be, that they were using to bolster their claims.
Yeah, the referencing is still terrible.
Yeah,
That's
so
one really good way to find out.
But as much as we had tried to sort of model and to be involved along the way with the process, there was something about the research culture that was completely missed out. Okay. And what I'm concerned about is that if we don't make that more explicit and it's not valued by the students, then we run the risk of not only having students shortcutting things, but polluting the literature.
That's a really interesting take. And I'm going to take my principal's hat off, if that's okay. I'm going to put my doctoral student hat on now, because I see this from the student's point of view. Because I struggled very badly with that concept, because I don't live in your world. So why do I care where my research articulates? You get that because you are dyed in the wool. You are trained in the discipline of it. I'm a neophyte in this space. When we research, I don't research to add fresh knowledge. I research to solve a problem. That's what most kind of professional doctorates are. And so I kind of got some sympathy with them. What is the way we do research is well articulated, I think. I think it exists for a reason, to keep the research base unpolluted, to make sure that everything that moves through that process and becomes knowledge at the end is clean, for want of a better word. So I absolutely hear you. But I don't know that it's about the job you've done in situating them in that tradition. I think there are two things. I think, firstly, can that tradition continue to survive in its current form as technology moves, or does it need to keep the principles but adapt its practice in a way that's much more accessible and understandable for people who are used to, I want it now, I'm going to do it now, I want it now, rather than 3 to 5 years, 10 years, a lifetime's worth of knowledge creation to lead to one point. That's very different, I think, for a number of young people. But I do think genuinely it's a hard concept to get to grips with, because this is my research. Why do I care about so-and-so's? And, you know, I had to be sat down, not that I kind of was academically dishonest, but I have interrogated that with my supervisor again and again and again, because why do I care? And the way she described it was actually super simple. Deb, you're not an island. If you haven't got bridges, nobody's going to use this knowledge. It's not deployable. If you're not on the end of a peninsula, or you're not connected, and then nobody can connect to you either and build on the work you've done. And kind of that, at that point, made it sit with me. But if these students aren't coming from that background, if they're neophytes to this tradition, maybe a different way of approaching it, just like it worked for me. Personalised ways of getting the same principles to do the same thing.
So, in the interest of time, and I think we could stay here for a very long time, I'm going to close this seminar. I'm going to ask everybody to thank Debs again for a terrific and thought-provoking talk. And I'm sure
it's been a pleasure. Genuinely, it has.
Debs has left her bridges on
Tell
the
me.
board. So if you want
If
to,
you're ever in Hull,
we know where to find you, but I'm sure you can answer a couple of questions outside the mic, and
absolutely.
if you know.
But the doors are open.